Please give him a warm hand, Mr. Knupp.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Berka. So the title of the talk is Writing Idiomatic Python. And I know I'm the only thing standing between you guys and drinks, so I'll keep this light and short. Don't worry about it. So who is Jeff Knupp? I'm the author of Writing Idiomatic Python, like Berko said. I'm a developer at a company called AppNexus in New York. I create a library called Sandman, and I'm a blogger, which is how most people know me. So what's the format for this talk going to be? Well, it was going to be this really dynamic, interactive question and answer, we all love each other type thing, but then I realized you guys would probably not ask the exact questions I needed you to. So I took the liberty of asking the questions for you. So the title of all these slides is the questions that you should have asked. So what's this about anyway? Well, it's a good question. It's about writing idiomatic Python, of course. So these are probably the questions you have at this point. What the hell does idiomatic Python mean? How the hell do you write it? And why the hell should you care? Well, idiomatic Python is not a dumb snake, which is the only thing that my mom tells all her friends. It's a bad joke now, and it's a bad joke when she tells it. So idiomatic Python is just Pythonic code. So what is Pythonic code then, of course, right? We get these recursive definitions. Well, so here's my definition of Pythonic. It's code written in the way that the Python community has agreed it should be written. And I have a sample usage there, which is, describes code that I've seen a lot. But it should be synonymous with idiomatic. So who decides all of this? Me. I decide what's idiomatic. No, just kidding. Python developers, the community in general, through the code they write and share and criticize and review, that's how what is idiomatic gets decided. So all the code that you see on GitHub, all the code that's in the standard library, all the code that you share internally in your organization, those patterns that you see in there become the idioms that I'm talking about. So the other places that you'll see idioms defined is, sometimes it's Guido in his pronouncements, and sometimes in the PEPs, the text of them actually say, this is the right way to do this, this is the wrong way to do this. So why should you care about writing idiomatic code? Well, there are three big benefits. The first is readability, then maintainability, and correctness. And it's not, the point of writing idiomatic code is not to show how clever you are or how many language constructs you can use. The point is to gain the benefit that I listed up here, right? To gain these benefits. And I don't care what language you write in. If somebody tells you that there is some secret method to increase readability, maintainability, and correctness, you should take note. So, the other one was people will stop laughing at your code. That's the bonus reason. So whenever I give this talk, I always get objections at the end. So I'm just going to deal with them beforehand. So here are some common objections that developers or non-developers give to being told to write idiomatic code. But I'm not a programmer. I'm a something scientist. So I don't have to write idiomatic code. Well, it's even more important that you write idiomatic code because unless you want your research peer-reviewed, if you write bad code, it's going to be peer ignored. And that's the kind of thing that hampers research instead of fosters research. So we being the Python community has had a great influx of new programmers, especially in the sciences area, and it's up to us to instruct them the proper way of writing code, but at the same time, it's up to you guys as the scientists to put it on yourself to write code in a Pythonic way. So, I mean, making your code readable and maintainable is just as much a part of your job as publishing to journals is. And would a journal accept a paper where the description of your research was just total gibberish? Probably not. So, you shouldn't be then relying on code that is total gibberish to generate your results. But I'm not a programmer, I just write scripts. This is one that gets me every time. And I make the analogy, I'm not a thief, I just steal small things. Well, yeah, it's when you are writing a program in Python, you're assuming the role of a programmer and you have to act like a programmer. If you call your Python program scripts, then I'm going to have to come and punch you, because really it's like saying, this doesn't matter, I'm more knowledgeable than the rest of the community, and I know what I do and don't have to do better than anyone else. And I'm a big guy, so if I punch you, that's going to hurt. Another one is, I'm coming from Java. Can I use classes for everything and not use list comprehensions and name everything with factory and interface and, have just classes everywhere? And no, that's not Python, right? I would call it Jython, but I'll have to look into securing that name. I don't know. But if you write Python as Java, other people who need to, maintain your code are not going to be able to do it, because they're Python programmers, not Java in Python programmers. Idioms, at the end of the day, are what make Python Python. And when you strip away all the syntax and the formatting, idioms are what or what differentiate programming languages from one another. So how does writing idiomatic Python help readability? So because it's the agreed upon way, within the community of writing code, the readers of your code will have no problem following along with what you're doing. And problems following along is another name for cognitive burden. So great, what's cognitive burden? It's the increased mental effort required to keep track of what's going on. So I am pretty stupid, like it says, and I can only remember like 2 or 3 things at most at one time. So if I'm reading code and you make me keep a lot of things in my memory to be able to follow what's going on, you're doing me a disservice, and your code is not idiomatic, right? The purpose of writing idiomatic code is I never have to keep anything in memory. I can see instantly what's going on, and I can just move on to the next line. So readability also is not just about concision. It could be, so it's not just about concision, because it's very easy to make concise code that is terribly unreadable. So it's not about, minimizing lines of code or minimizing the length of code. It's really about, decreasing cognitive burden. And cognitive burden exists all over the place. It could be reading a program, it could be reading Moby Dick, it could be watching an episode of Law and Order. They always, make you think and remember things. And the less you have to think and remember, the better when you're reading code. So I haven't quoted Knuth yet, but here it is, the obligatory Knuth quote. Instead of imagining that our main task is to instruct a computer what to do, let us concentrate rather on explaining to human beings what we want the computer to do, right? So we're not coding in, machine code. We're not writing machine code. We're writing higher level code, and it exists for a reason. And that reason is so that we are able to explain to others what we're trying to get the program to do. And others, typically, at the end of the day, is us, because we're the most frequent maintainers of our code. So maintainability, who cares about that, right? And this is a quote I love. Always code as if the guy who ends up maintaining your code will be a violent psychopath. Oh, that's cut off at the end there. Well, it says psychopath. So yeah, I mean, and that's the idea, is to code as if, the person knows who you are, knows where you live, and is not afraid to come over to your house. Okay, so now I've sufficiently scared you. How does idiomatic Python help? If you're the only one that can read your code, then I will make the assertion that correctness doesn't matter. Because anyone else who has to later come in and maintain it and can't do that, then your code is worthless, right? It might as well just be total gibberish that happens to produce the right answer. Bad but working code is not a victimless crime, right? It affects everyone after that code is written. So how do I make sure others can read? Whoa. How do I make sure others can read my code? So idiomatic code always makes the author's intention clear, but that doesn't always mean it's correct. There's a big difference between correctness and just using code idioms. But what it does help with is letting others spot mistakes. So if your code is clear and I can follow along, then it's much easier for me to spot mistakes in your thinking rather than it is trying to go through and spot little mistakes in your code because you're doing something easy a different way. So if you write this, I instantly get suspicious if I'm reading this code. And I think, why'd they do that? There's got to be some reason. I'm not smart enough. I got to focus, I got to look at this, and I got to figure out why they did it this way. There must be some special reason. And it ends up with, me just a quivering ball of mush, but really it ends up with me not caring about the code as much. It ends up with me not giving as much attention to the code as, it needs to be given. So what's an example of what I'm talking about? What does the following code do? Quick. And I swear this is almost taken verbatim from code that I reviewed not too long ago, where the variables were named AA, and then AB. The next one was named AAD in every function. So, obviously that hurts readability. Okay, now the better one. It's obvious what this code does because three things are working together: the names of the variables and function, the documentation, and the actual code itself. And the bright ones among you are already saying, no, wait, that's wrong. There's an even better way to do it. or division by zero error. Well, here's the even better way to do it, which is only applicable now in the past couple of months, right? So part of writing idiomatic code means staying up to date and following along with changes in the code, in the language itself. Okay, so I talked about readability, maintainability. How does it help correctness? Like I said, when you're writing code, if you write really terrible, impossible to read code, a tool like PyTest and testing is going to catch it. But a human reviewing your code doesn't have that capability. They're not going to catch it because they're going to be too fraught with the task of reading your code to be able to catch anything. So logically, if it's clear what you're trying to do and the way that you do it is clear, then it's easier for others to follow your thinking. So you say, well, we do code reviews here and they catch everything. If your code is poor, how likely am I to spot a bug? And more importantly, how likely is it that I'll review your code with the attention it requires? And most importantly, how likely am I to care about reviewing your code in the future? That's a big thing to think about is the burden you put on others when writing your code makes them care less and less in code reviews about reviewing your code. So your bad code just ships because no one cares anymore. So people say, I'm paid to write code, not to read it. Reading and writing are two sides of the same coin, and really the most important thing is you are the most frequent maintainer of your own code. And raise your hand if this has ever happened to you. You come back to some code that you wrote a month ago, you have no idea what it is, what it's doing, why you did it that way, and you wish you could slap the past version of yourself right in the mouth. Yeah. So by a slight margin right there, I think we have a majority. So how does idiomatic code make it more correct? It doesn't. It makes the flaws more obvious. If you write idiomatic code, then reviewers can catch those flaws. They can focus on what the code does and not how it does it. And really, what the code does was the whole point of writing a program in the first place. How it does it is really just the details. If there were 50 ways to iterate over a list, then code reviews would be impossible, right? You'd have to check every single time, okay, did he iterate over this list the correct way? When you write code that is not idiomatic or not Pythonic, I have to check if your solution to an already solved problem is correct. And I don't want to spend time on reading and checking the solutions to already solved problems. So examples of idiomatic or Pythonic code. And these are just some quick examples, but it's amazing how many people don't know the enumerate function exists. And when I say people, I am clearly not referring to most of the people in this room. I'm referring to novice to intermediate Python programmers. I get so much email from my book, which this is in, about this idiom, and people thanking me for explaining to them that enumerate exists, that it's scary. So here's a little longer example where we're writing a function to get the both most popular and most active users from two lists, right? The first one iterates over one, checking for content in the second. The second just uses sets. The second one is not only more clear, but if the thinking is wrong, if I used an or instead of an and, that's much easier to catch than if the for loop was wrong in the previous one, right? What's it? Okay, if the order were, yeah, in this case, it's not meant to be. It's just get the list of them. But yes, you are right. Thank you. Okay, this is another one, very very simple and straightforward, and hopefully not contentious. Just checking to see if a name's in a list of values, and I've seen the top code almost more often than I've seen the bottom code, unfortunately. So what's the point of all this? Python is only getting more popular, which is absolutely fantastic. But learning to write code in an idiomatic fashion is vital, not only to your success, but to the success of the language. If we have this giant influx of new programmers and we don't take the time to mentor them and explain to them explain what is Pythonic, then we're going to end up with a whole lot of code that no one's going to be able to maintain. And these are going to be people that you work with. These are going to be people that submit patches to your open source project. It's up to everyone to not only know the Python idioms, but also to spread them and let others know about how to write Pythonic code. Idioms are, like I said before, what gives a language its uniqueness, and it's what makes Python Python. So, idioms at the end of the day are Python. That's what it is. So, Thanks for listening, and I hope you all enjoyed yourself. And if you have any questions, happy to take them now. Yeah.
Actually, sort of more of a quick comment, which is something that I hear very often about things like write bad code, which is, oh, just a one-off, just a quick script.
Right.
It never is. It always lives. Code lives on.
Right, and my slide about scripts, I will punch those people. You just give me their names, I will punch them. Because, just like you said, scripts have a way of living on far longer than the author intended. And, you know, that's one of the most common problems with code maintenance is just no one ever expected it to live as long as it does. Yes? Okay, a friend of yours is a scientist? Okay. Uh-huh.
But he says that that's because of many reasons, including sometimes he only cares about the outcome, the number for his publication, and probably he will throw away that code. So this way he developed some very bad habits of using non-idiomatic code. And, for
Sure.
years and years. So how can I help my friend?
Well, well, your friend can just pick up my book and know how to no, and that's what I talked about. You know, we have a big influx of people from the sciences, and you know, writing idiomatic code is not necessarily the most important thing on their mind, but they have to treat the code that they write just as importantly as, you know, the results that they get from experimentation, because at the end of the day, how they generate their results is really just as important, right? And someone being able to peer review that, you know, we're getting to the point now where it's more and more common to see the code submitted with a paper. I mean, we're far from that being the norm, but you know, eventually that's going to happen, and you're not going to want to submit papers where no one can peer review it because your code is gibberish. So tell your friend to, you know, just make sure he's focusing as much on the way he, you know, created the results as he is on the results themselves. Well, you know, ones like PEP8 and PEP257 are more just, you know, here are Python idioms, put them down in your list of Python idioms. There are other PEPs, though, that in describing the way that, you know, the library, whatever they refer to, how they work, that go on and mention, you know, this is the way specifically in this library to do this, and don't do it this way. So, you know, it's not in every PEP, certainly, and, you know, with the PEPs that have it, I don't have them off the top of my head, but just, you know, if you read them, you'll see. It'll jump out at you. Yes, read all the PEPs. I assume everyone here has. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think in Python the philosophy is that everything should be done, or there should be one obvious way to do things.
Right.
How do you compare other languages? What you call idiomatic is basically more stricter defined in Python, I think, than, for instance, Ruby has other philosophy.
Yeah, there's a reason that writing idiomatic Ruby doesn't exist. You know, I mean, the only reason I could have written my book in the first place is because Python does have this kind of culture of doing things the right way.
Is that from experience that you select Python on that criteria?
I'm sorry, is that what?
Is that what determines your preference for Python?
Oh, is that what determined my preference? Well, I don't think I really knew about that, you know, when I chose Python. Honestly, I can't even remember. I think it was because I had to port a Ruby project to a Rails project to a Django project is how I learned Python, which I mean, I didn't really learn Python until far after that, but no, I think looking back, if I could tell, my past self at the crossroads of when I learn, a high-level language, which one to choose, I'm very happy with my choice of Python, and I think everyone in the room probably is happy with theirs, but I think it does help, especially novices, that there is only one way to do things, or there is one best way to do things. But, it's up to us to teach them what that best way is. Yep.
How easy do you think it will be to create tooling for warning against the wrong use?
Sure. So the question was, how easy do you think it is to create tooling to, warn against the misuse of idioms? Actually, there's a team at the Hacker School in New York that's working exactly on that, using the contents of the book as a guide. They're coming up with a tool like Pilot type thing just to check the idioms in the book. So we'll see how difficult it is. I mean, it's just code at the end of the day. We can always do it, but how much effort it requires, that's another question.
Have they published this already somewhere? The results?
No, they're still in the middle of it. I think their semester ends 2 months or so. But what else?
Picking up what the right idioms comes from reading a lot of code.
Yep.
Are there any code bases you could recommend to read?
Flask and requests. No, but to be honest, those are two fantastic examples. There are, I mean, a lot of the most popular Python projects on GitHub tend to be good examples of idiomatic code than not. And really, after 5 minutes of reading a code base, you kind of have a sense if this is good code or not. And so, it's not just from reading one code base; it's from reading a lot of code and picking up the patterns that emerge that you start to see in all these code bases. So, even if you pick the wrong one and you pick up some terribly crappy code, it doesn't matter because you're not going to see those patterns elsewhere, hopefully. Yeah.
So my friend is a manager. And he says, stop refactoring your code altogether. Once it's working, move on, and I don't care about whatever you're talking about. I just want the next functionality to be shipped as soon as possible. What's your killer argument against that?
What's my killer argument against as soon as it's working, just ship? Sure. I would say that, God forbid, anyone ever has to move things around in the code base because you're never going to be able to, I mean, assuming you don't have tests, but even if you do have tests, if people can't read the code and you need to make major changes or create a new feature, no one will be able to read the old code. So, I mean, he's probably here's the killer argument. He's going to pay in the future so much for the time that the developers spend trying to understand this terrible code than he would have if just up front he let people spend a little more time making it idiomatic and more Pythonic, by far. Thanks. Any more questions, comments? Okay. Oh, sorry.
I think there are actually some bad Python idioms. The most common one that I see is string concatenation. The standard thing of sticking them all into a list and then using empty quote string .join, I think makes the code harder to read. And if you just add them together, it's slower, but it's much easier to read. So where do you stand on this sort of,
I wouldn't consider that an idiom. I would consider it laziness, really. I mean, people just don't want to put writing a string out and then using .join to make it. It's because they want a list, but they don't want to have to type in the quotes and commas and all that kind of stuff, right?
no, you may have like 5 or 6 strings you're passed in from various places, and you need to assemble them into one big string. And so if you say A plus B plus C plus D plus E, this creates a bunch of intermediary objects, and it's kind of slow.
I see what you're saying.
There's this classic Python idiom from 10 or 15 years ago that says, don't do that ever. Create a list, and then use empty string dot join on the list, and that joins it together much faster and uses a lot less intermediate objects. So this is a classic Python idiom that I've always hated.
Okay, and that's fair. You know what? Idioms, and especially the idioms in my book, are not meant to be gospel, right? If you're at the point in your programming career where you can come up with arguments against specific idioms, then certainly don't use them. I mean, we're all paid as programmers to think, right? Use your best judgment, use common sense. It's not gospel, but that doesn't mean you can't yell at people for doing that. I mean, by all means.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.